So Saints moved off the bottom of the Premier League for the first time since the World Cup break with a vital 1-0 win over Leicester at St Mary's. Glenn, I'll start with you. A massive win, but for me, we were very, very lucky. Leicester could have scored 2 or 3 goals. How were your nerves watching that one?
I kind of watch the game in a kind of resigned state of mind these days. So I don't get too, in the words of Nigel Atkins, don't get too high, don't get too low. Draw a blue line under it, move on after the game. Yeah, it was a bit it was a bit nervy the last half an hour because we kind of gave up completely on attacking, and I dread to think what the possession stats were for the last half an hour. But it felt like about 95%, and I got eye strain because I was at the chapel end, and the ball spent the entire last half an hour up the other end. So yeah, it was a bit of a tough watch the last half an hour, sort of hoping we get to the end. We've had plenty of games in the past where we've missed chances, and the opposition have. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Newcastle at home this season. You know, we had chances, didn't take them. They took their chances and the game was over. And that's the way Leicester will be looking at it. They had the chances, they didn't get a single shot on target. You know, on another day, we could easily be sitting here discussing a 3-1 defeat where we left a striker free in the box 3 times and that was the end of that. But, you know, we got away with it, courtesy of the guy who I said was half decent last week. Which I have to totally put my hands up. I still think he is decent, but he had a shocking game yesterday. So, yeah, I thought, you know, first 20 minutes were a bit odd. We didn't really do much there. And then for 20 minutes, we looked like a proper team. We carried an attacking threat, mainly through Alcaraz, who I thought was a revelation in that position. I thought he was excellent. Always looking to have a shot, always looking to be positive. Got the penalty, missed that. In the past, that would have been the signal for us to kind of get all down about things. But we kept going and got the goal. Got the goal straight after that. Just the way things are going at the moment, I felt sure it was going to get disallowed by the VAR. So, you know, it's nice that it wasn't. But yeah, the second half was tough, and we had to, you know, there was some good defending in there. But I think you can say you've defended well if you've not allowed any chances. I don't think we defended particularly brilliantly because we did allow those chances that on another day would have seen us lose again. But at the end of the day, the end justified the means. We got to the end. We got the 3 points. And I don't know if you've seen Theo Walcott's interview on the on the club website. It's really good, actually, where, you know, he basically says it's all about the results, and he's dead right.
Yeah, I think perhaps you might have said something similar as well. Steve, you've had a chance to sleep on that result. How are you feeling about it today?
I mean, it's a massive 3 points, isn't it? I mean, we're now sort of right back in the mix. Only a point off of sort of teams above the dotted line. So yeah, it can't be seen as anything other than a positive weekend, especially the way all the other results have fallen pretty nicely for us. I mean, Bournemouth being 2 up and throwing it away at Arsenal in the 98th minute was a
shame. It was a shame, wasn't it?
Oh, my heart bleeds for them. But yeah, I mean that was kind of a sign of how things might pan out, I suppose, over the weekend for us. I mean, let's be honest, we've had enough weekends where every single result's gone the opposite way. So you take these weekends when they present themselves. I thought we were. I mean, first half I thought we were fine. First 20 we were kind of feeling our way into it. Leicester looked a little bit more likely, but I mean, as the stats say, not a shot on target in 96 minutes. 100 minutes, given that we had a fair few added at the end of the first half. And at the end of the day, they seem to be so reliant on Maddison. Yeah. He was good, I thought, but he was good in areas where he wasn't actually useful. In many respects, he was dropping deep a lot to collect the ball to feet. Which we were quite happy for him to do, because as long as he's not 25 yards from goal in the centre, then okay, you can deal with it. And yeah, I thought we despite the fact that obviously there were a few crosses into the box that, as Glenn said, on another day, Iheanacho probably gets 2 headers, and I think it was Wout Fass, wasn't it, who somehow managed to head one from a corner, probably back closer to the corner flag than the near post, from a free header. And I mean, on another day those go in, but yesterday wasn't that other day, and we got away with it. We've had loads of games where we miss those presentable chances and we get punished. So swings and roundabouts, you kind of take the balance with it, and just kind of suck up the glory, I suppose.
And move on. Yeah, I'm certainly enjoying these positive podcasts. It's been a while since we've had a few results like this. Yeah.
Well, let's give us 5 minutes until we start on Wednesday.
Jacob, we were all pretty critical of the team after that Leeds game last week. So, what made the difference for you against Leicester? Where was their game won? What were the differences?
I think Ruben Sellers, I think he's been one of the more positive aspects of Southampton's season. I think what is good about him is that he incorporates some of Harsental's strengths, but also he knows that he's a little bit more flexible than him. I think he realised, especially against Grimsby, that the whole system was too narrow, everything was too slow. Saints aren't the greatest at passing through the lines anyway. So he brought in these two wingers in Walcott and Sulemana, and I thought the runs they made in that first half especially were quite clever. There's one incident, I think, where Ainsley Maitland-Niles had the ball and Walcott went to show to feet and then span in behind, and they won a corner and I think handball appeal, and I thought that was really sharp, and it just spoke of the threat that 4-2-3 posed. And then Alcaraz as well, he's always been better without the ball really in terms of making those forward runs into the box. All of his goals at River Plate Racing Club were like that. So it didn't surprise me, that type of goal, and I think Sellers knows how to get the best out of him, and I think this is now going to be the formula, this personnel as well, that are going to stick till the end of the season. I think you've seen it's quite clear with James Bree and Adouzi playing for the B team, Saleta, Sarr and Orsic now. I think they're going to be hooked out for the long term. That this is the group of players, the nucleus of the squad that's going to be selected. And I think Shea Adams was coming back in. I think that's a massive boost as well, because I know he gets maligned a lot, misses chances, but he's not the guy that's there to be the out and out number 9, the goal scorer. He's always been better as a link-up player, having a foil, and him and Alcaraz, I thought, dovetailed really well in and out of possession. And you saw with the goal, I think that pass was fantastic. And it goes with the cliche. I think it was a Kevin De Bruyne or something. I think match of the day we've been talking about a lot more.
Let's just talk about that goal and that pass. But it all started, Glenn, with that tackle from Lavia, who I thought had a really good game again yesterday. He wins the ball back and gets things moving yesterday.
Yeah, he does. And I thought he was excellent, and I thought he was one of the few that played well against Grimsby as well. He he seems to be getting back into his rhythm now after his injury, and we have to hope and look after him, and have to hope that he lasts to the end of the season, because we desperately need him. We're desperately reliant on this 19-year-old kid to stay fit and stay performing the way he is. And the chances are, whether we go up or whether we go down, these will be the last 13 games he plays for us. So, in order to give us any chance of keeping him next year, we have to stay up. And he will play a massive part in that if we manage it, because he does the job that no one else in our squad is capable of doing. Not, it's funny, there was Nathan Jones, wasn't it, who said he's not particularly good defensively. Well, I don't really see that, and that was a good example, that tackle that he put in to win the ball to start the move. That's that's as good as anyone does in that position. So I have it's interesting because he seemed to get a bit of criticism off of Ruben Sellers during the week. Maybe Jacob will talk about that in a minute, but I don't really see it. I hope it was just a case of trying to keep his feet on the ground, because the kid's got everything, and he will be. He's a good player. He's a really good Premier League player already, and he's going to be something else if he develops the way he should do. So I thought he had another excellent game, and he's the sort of player that allows other players to play as well.
He enjoyed the win as well. That's for sure. Jacob, do you just want to touch on that those comments? Because we were kind of following your Twitter commentary, I think, as we probably do on a Friday, those of us that are at work, from the press conference and some of the things that Sellers is coming out of. And obviously he was critical of Lavia. And at the time we thought, well, maybe this might just be a little lost in translation. But I know that you had the chance to delve a little deeper with that.
Yeah, a piece has just gone on the Athletic now about that, because I found it curious, because it was the last question that Sky asked in the broadcast section, and it was basically just an opportunity for Sellers to, it's an easy win just to expand and tell everyone how good Lavia is, what a player, how we signed for 12 million and he's going to be a really good player. But then he gave this short answer where he's not impressed. So I asked Ruben about it, and he went on for about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and he started talking about how he wants him to dominate games and how he needs to keep his feet on the ground. And I think when you read it and you really analyse his comments, I think it's because he wants Southampton, or Sellers wants Southampton to be better in possession, to not sink deep like they did in the last 20 minutes against Leicester. He wants them to have more control. And it didn't matter so much under Jones, because Jones basically bypassed the midfield a lot of the time. But I think Sellers recognises with 3 open play goals in 10 games pre-Leicester that Southampton have to carry more of a threat. They have to implement more patterns of play. And the way to do that is through sustaining attacks and keeping the ball. And Lavia is the best at keeping the ball. So although, he's nice and pretty and he garnishes games, Sellers wants him to make a bigger impact. And he's got 0 assists this season. He's got 1 goal, I think. Sellers wants big, impactful moments from Lavia. And although he's fantastic at getting out of tight pockets, how much of that really impacts a game on the scoreline? And I think that was one of the things that Ruben wanted. And I think we saw that in the first half. That tackle, like Glenn and Steve said, was excellent, and it was overlooked at the time, but when you watch it back, you see how significant that was. And those are the type of examples that I think Ruben was alluding to in his presser.
Do you think it was a fair comment, Steve? I think with Nathan Jones, perhaps the comments in the press conferences were so often about him that anything about the players were overlooked. So maybe they didn't stand out. But I know that you and I were like, what? What's he on about?
It certainly seemed odd for those, because obviously the way these press conferences work, we get to see what happens in the broadcast press conference, but we've got no idea what happens in the written one, and it's all embargoed until like later that evening, so we don't hear for hours about what's been said in the follow-up. So yeah, like immediately following the following that press conference, it was a case of, well, I mean, is he kind of sort of just said something that made sense to him in Spanish and it's just not translated very well, or has he actually just said no? I've not been impressed by him. Was it literally as clear cut as that? And I think ultimately the answer is probably somewhere kind of vaguely in the middle, but varying sort of more towards him actually not being overly impressed. But I think it's more that he sees how much ability and potential the kid's got already at such a tender age, with such little first team senior experience, that he thinks that actually he should be able to kind of demonstrate this ability on a more consistent basis.
Glenn, I want to talk about the other end of the experience scale, as it were. Start for Theo Walcott yesterday. Kind of felt like he earned that and offered a bit more, maybe it's the leadership and the experience. He was one of the few people that came out of Wednesday night with a bit of respect still intact, perhaps. Oh, he's on mute.
Mute, Glenn.
Amateur hour. Sorry, I got cold. He was he came on as a sub in the Grimsby game, and he was absolutely excellent when he came on. I thought he demonstrated the long lost art of a player in a Southampton shirt darting into space to receive the ball, and he did that a lot yesterday as well. There was like the penalty stemmed from a 1-2 that he played as we worked it out the pitch. The early sort of run down the line of Maitland-Niles was the same as well. And I thought he had a really good game, and I thought it was a shame they took him off. I thought the substitutions were absolute murder, to be honest. I don't know if we're going to talk about that. But
oh yeah,
my word! I just basically it took off. Walcott was one of our better performing players, and taking him off, he didn't look tired.
Well, no, he literally just sprinted from halfway back 30 yards to put in a challenge.
Yeah. So I thought he played really well. He played well against Grimsby. If you play well in that game, no one can really argue if you get put in the Premier League team. And he did really well. And it's a good story that he's been miles from a first team place over the last sort of year or so, and he's worked his way back in. I mean, you could argue whether that's down to poor options in that position, and other players performing poorly. But he did well, and he got in the team, and he played well yesterday. So I hope he stays in the team next week, because he deserves it. And it's we talk about him being an example to other players, and it's a great example that no matter how far you are from the first team at various points, if you can put the performances in training and make the most of it when you get your 20-minute substitute appearance or whatever, then great. It's just a shame that it doesn't work the other way around, when you've got players who absolutely stunk the place out on Wednesday, and they still get minutes on the pitch on Saturday, which it's a shame it doesn't work the other way around as well. But no, Theo, I thought was excellent, and as I said earlier on, his interview that's on the club website is really good as well. So yeah, top man, and hopefully he keeps going.
Yeah, because if we're going to stay up, then we're going to need his experience. Steve, just a word on James Ward-Prowse. Is it time for him to give penalties to somebody else? Because he never looks confident, does he? I think there's two he's missed this season, and there was the England one. And he normally scores the rebound, doesn't he? So he kind of masks over it. But yesterday, it wasn't brilliant, was it?
No, and it was, and the problem is, I think on the Sky coverage, I saw reference to it on Twitter, that on the Sky coverage, they obviously, just as the penalty is about to be taken, they put that sort of the plot of where he's hit his most recent 5 or 6 penalties, and basically every single one's in the same place. Keepers at Premier League level, even keepers I know of keepers at non-league level who do research on opposition penalty takers.
You don't need the post-it note on the back of the water bottle,
exactly,
do you, to know where that's going?
Yeah, exactly. So, Danny Ward is not a very good goalkeeper, and yet he knew exactly where Prowse was going to put that penalty, and made a very comfortable save. He put enough power on it, but it was just so telegraphed where he's going to put it now.
Yeah.
And Prowse even joked himself in the post-match, didn't he? Oh, I'd rather have a free kick. It's like, well, there's your answer. If your captain's saying that, he absolutely should not be taking penalties now. In terms of candidates, Alcaraz strikes the ball pretty well. The finish for the goal took it early, I think, which is what surprised Ward, which meant that he was kind of just stood there, not really able to react properly. So yeah, maybe Alcaraz is.
Has Carl Walker-Peters taken one before, or have I dreamt that up?
Don't think so. No.
Maybe it's free kick.
Probably in a shootout, he's taken one.
I was thinking Maitland-Niles apparently. Penalty.
But yeah, other than that, Lavia possibly.
Sure. Alcaraz used to take free kicks for Racing Club. I'm sure some of his highlight reels were sort of dead ball strikes. So
taking free kicks is evidently not proof of being able to take as we've just seen. So I don't know. I guess the issue is that there aren't obvious candidates in the current 11. You look a little bit deeper, and you might look at someone like Stu Armstrong. Tends to strike the ball quite well, and he's fairly composed, quite versatile. Actually, I think El Yunusi will probably be a good penalty taker. I think, weirdly,
he'd pass it backwards.
It's just there's no obvious candidate other than Prowse at the moment, until we've got somebody who's actually reliably sticking the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah.
Who do you choose to take a very obvious sort of free shot at goal, other than the only person who's found the back of the net in recent weeks?
Scored a few goals, yeah.
So yeah, there's no right answer until we until we get a striker who we know we can rely on.
I want to get on to those double changes, and I'll get Glen's view on this in just a moment when Armstrong and Mara came on. But Jacob, I know that Sellers was talking about this after the game, and just to kind of preempt, he was kind of sticking by his decision and almost justifying why those two came on after the poor performance on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't actually mind the thinking behind it, because Leicester were leaving a lot of space. Souttar's not the most mobile of defenders, is he? And I think in Siku Mara and Adam Armstrong, he thinks he can get better pressure from the front. If they press from the front, the whole team can get out of the pitch, stop them from dropping deep, whilst offering a threat in behind as well. So I did actually mind the thinking behind it. The issue is the optics, because of Wednesday, how bad those two were coming on. but also I think it's a little bit too early. And in all of his games, he's made that double striking substitution. And I think if you just wait 5-10 minutes, and I think fans can accept it a little bit more. But when you've got basically half an hour plus stoppage time to go, and you've got Sekou Mara and Adam Armstrong on the pitch who don't really offer much in terms of hold up play or are actually very ruthless in the first place, I think that's a struggle. I wouldn't mind bringing one of them on if you had Shea and Adam Armstrong. I think that would have been okay. But bringing both of them is a risk. But Sellers clearly has his plan, and I think he's very reluctant to play Sulemana throughout. I think he still thinks he's bedding in, and these are decisions that he has to live and die by at the end of the day.
Is there an argument, Glenn, to say that we're defending from the front and you change the front three because then they're fitter and they, I'm trying to justify this now, like lead the charge into the final half, or just not at all?
Well, I can see why he does it in the same way that I could see in the Chelsea game where he did it when he made he made the same substitutions. It was it was Onuachu, Sulemana and Armstrong all came off, didn't they? And around the same amount of time left in the game where we're 1-0 up. The issue is with it is that you're basically giving up on attacking because we'd already had to take off Alcaraz and put Elyounoussi on. And I couldn't understand that substitution at that particular time. I'd have thought, as he's playing as a number 10, that's where Stuart Armstrong would be ideal. He seemed to be the better choice. But anyway, Elyounoussi on. And then to take off Adams and Walcott at the same time and bring on the Chuckle brothers was just we're not attacking anymore.
Surely the Chuckle brothers would imply that they're actually passing to each other, though.
Yeah, to me, to you, to them. Again, to me, to them, to me, to at the moon with a shot. Honestly, and as you touched upon, they were absolutely diabolical. The reason we lost to Grimsby, in my opinion, was the front four. So you add Orsic and Gineppo into that. Just shocking. They were, all four of them were absolutely shocking. So I was amazed that those two got on the pitch again. It's putting all your eggs in the basket of not conceding a goal. Because imagine if Leicester had scored 5 minutes after that, after that substitution had been made, and you're then looking at, well, what can we do to try and score another goal? And we've got that forward line. So that's what worries me. And I totally agree with Jacob's point for that reason, amongst others, is that if you leave it to 70, 75 minutes, when Adams is genuinely knackered, when Walcott is genuinely knackered, then I can kind of see it. But I didn't see the necessity for that change at the time. And for reasons that we've discussed earlier, okay, the end justifies the means because we got the 3 points. But I can't see that working too often. But having said that, it's worked twice in 3 games.
In the last 3, yeah.
Yeah, it's worked twice in 3 games. But, if we try and do it next week against Man United, say for argument's sake, we're 1-0 up and we tried to defend for half an hour against Man United, I just don't see it working. So I think that tactic maybe needs tweaking a little bit. But there you go. We got there.
We did. We got there in the end. Steve, a couple more things I want to touch on before we move on. A clean sheet for Bazunu, which was great. He's not good for the nerves at the moment, is he? I know McCarthy played on Wednesday night. Were you surprised to see McCarthy not involved in the squad? I know, I don't know if you were watching, but like Willie Caballero seemed to be almost coaching from the sidelines at times and having a word with some of the younger players. It felt like maybe his role in the squad and on the bench perhaps is more than McCarthy, who might just sit there kicking his heels.
Yeah, potentially, but I think it does sound as if McCarthy might have had some sort of knock at the weekend, so he wasn't in the 20. So I mean, you take that kind of out of the equation, I guess. If we're now assuming that Caballero is basically there as the archetypal third choice keeper, never ever going to play, but is a great guy to have around for experience and presumably fantastic dressing room banter. But I mean, Bazunu, I mean, he will justify with a little bit of justification. Say, well, I've had 2 clean sheets in the last 3 games that I've played, and yeah, I mean, you look at the raw numbers, and he's correct. But yeah, certainly, yesterday we looked. I mean, he looked a little bit shaky. I mean, he was given an absolute shocker of a back pass by Walker Peters for that shanked clearance that went straight to Iheanacho. And I mean, everyone, like the guys near me in the Northern were giving Bazunu an absolute volley for that. Which, I mean, yeah, he's not made the best of it, but he's been given an absolute hospital pass there.
Yeah, agreed.
And given that we got that ball back after a sort of uncontested drop ball after an injury, there was absolutely no reason for Walker-Peters to pass that ball backwards. And I don't think anybody other than him was expecting that to happen. So he just caught everybody completely on the hop and got away with it, obviously. But that, I mean, the big one was was that cross in the 95th minute, where I guess you might have if you're being really generous, you might say that him kind of coming for it and flapping at it has probably put Suter off a little bit. Because all he's got to do is nod it downwards, or at least slightly more downwards than he has, and Leicester get an equaliser. And then all of a sudden you're pointing fingers, and it's an absolute disaster. But again, we rode our luck. We got away with it. Other weeks we haven't done, and it's you take the rough with the smooth. I think he's been slightly better the last few games. He's not looked. Obviously the goal last week at Leeds was poor from both him and Bednarek, but he's not looked like, basically, if you hit anything at him, it's just going to go in regardless of the pace or the direction. He's come for crosses and taken stuff. His distribution has been okay. And there actually does look as if there's a bit more communication going on between him and the defenders. One thing I noticed as well from that shanked clearance that Iheanacho put over was that rather than what he's been doing in the previous 18 months, 2 years or so, Bednarek was actually encouraging when he then went back,
went over and high five.
He went back to Bazunu and said, "No, it's fine. Keep your head up, sort of get on with it, sort of blank it out of your memory. It's gone." Whereas in the past he'd have been all over him and making the kid feel 3 inches tall.
Yeah.
So that's an improvement already. So yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, realistically, given the performances we've seen, and the change hasn't been made, I find it very difficult to believe McCarthy's playing again this season, really.
Yeah. I was going to ask Jacob about that just before we get on to the Grimsby game. Obviously, Ruben Sellers was talking about his core of 7 or 8 players starting each week. Do you think we're starting to finally see that now? Do you think in his head he's got his best 11, and obviously Bazunu's going to be part of that?
I think so. I wouldn't be so sure Bazunu will carry on playing, because I think Alex McCarthy had pretty terrible luck, unsure the timings of his injury. He was going to come in for the game. I think it was before Brighton, so it's post Lincoln. Got injured.
First game, wasn't it? Was he going to bring him back in because they knew each other, or they played together?
Yeah, he was going to bring him back in. Then he's supposed to come back in for the Blackpool Cup game. Had issues with his hip in terms of distribution in training, so that prolonged his injury. Then came back for Grimsby. Didn't really have much to do, and I think he hurt his shoulder when he was 1v1 in the second half for that Grimsby player. And I think if he came through Grimsby, okay, it was going to be set up for Alex McCarthy to come back into the team. Again, issues with his injury, and Bazunu's carried on playing. He's probably played through that out of form patch, and you probably think, given he's now kept 2 clean sheets and 3, he's not in the worst form. I think you probably stick with him now because he's played through it. But yeah, I think there's been 2 opportunities this season where McCarthy would have undoubtedly come in. It's just whether he now makes a change after having that clean sheet.
Just a final word on booing players, Glenn, because this is absolute nonsense, right? I know we talked about Elyounoussi and not the best player, but when you're booing a player as he comes on, Bednarek's name getting read out, people booing, it's a strange situation we find ourselves in when that's happening at home and we're supposed to be getting behind the team.
Yeah, I mean, we're all critical. I'm critical in print. We're critical on here at times.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, maybe it's hypocritical to say, but it seems like you cross a line when you do it in the stadium, because at the end of the day, you're there to try and watch the 11 players representing your team do their best. And even if you don't think Elyounoussi, for example, is any good, how's it going to help him by booing him when his name's read out? or when he comes on as a sub. It's I mean, Bednarek did have a little bit coming to him, but so I can kind of understand it the first game, but I think that's his third home game now, and it's still happening. So yeah, I don't get it. It's but then people would argue that I've paid me money, I've got the right to do what I want, sort of thing. Well, yeah, but you're not really helping. So at the end of the day, it's up to individuals. But it surprises me. I mean, I think more people would think it's a bad thing than a good thing to be booing your players. So it surprised me that the amount, the number of people that have obviously jumped on this bandwagon. So I can't really say any more than that. I mean, I can't understand doing it in the stadium during the game or before the game. I really can't.